have Jacob with me today. He did the Overcome program and also the Vigor program. He was dealing with some really difficult pelvic floor issues and some sexual dysfunction, and he's doing way better now and wanted him to have an opportunity to tell his story. So thank you, Jacob, for being here and doing this.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So, you reached out and you told me that you've had a lot of progress and you pointed out some key takeaways and insights. And everyone has a different story, everyone has different symptoms, and everyone kind of jigs their own healing process together in a different way. And I'd love to just start out with what was going on. I mean, can you tell us about the symptoms when they started? Kind of go from there.
Yeah. I think the first time I really noticed it was when I was in law school, and that was maybe 15 years ago. And law school is pretty intense. There was a lot happening. I've had lifelong issues with ED and just, I would say, like just a performance mindset in general. So anxiety around sexuality, sexual connection. And so, it's hard to say the precise start of it, but that's been lifelong. But the pain part started when I was in law school, and I was diagnosed with chronic prostatitis, or maybe it was bacterial at first, and I took a bunch of rounds of antibiotics that didn't really do much. And then I found a doctor who really understood me, and I felt like finally felt kind of safe and relaxed around it. And the exam period passed, and then magically the pain disappeared. And so then things were pretty steady for a bunch of years and didn't have pain. And I had a child and didn't sleep a lot, and all the stressors on life and relationship. And I remember going out and getting a coffee, which I don't do very often, but with my brothers, had a cup of coffee, and then came home and was like, boom, pain started. And once that, I think I just crossed a threshold of tension that, yeah, just started roving around. It was like, felt like there was a golf ball at my perineum, and then I would have urinary pain, and then restricted flow, and then, I mean, pretty much everything you can imagine I experienced. And
Yeah.
then, I won't go further than that, but yeah, it was just like roving, then I started having premature ejaculation, which was, you know, one more unpleasant symptom on top of all the rest.
Yeah. And whenever that was surfacing and all these symptoms, what did you do initially?
Everything, right? I went to a doctor, went to a urologist. They didn't really find anything. Pelvic floor therapist said, "Yeah, your pelvic floor is tight for sure." And they did internal exam. And I remember they would do like internal massage, and I would come home and I'd be like, "Whoa, no pain, and like sexual function's amazing." And then, the next day, I was like, I think in some ways, success was part of the problem because I would grasp it and get it so attached to the idea of like being over the pain and the dysfunction that that would bring me back into the issue, which was like this need to control my life in general, but also to like be good enough to perform, to, yeah, to really fix myself. This idea that I was broken, and if only I could be out of pain and have the function I wanted, then I would be happy.
Yeah. You found what you thought was a specific tool. It was like, this is the thing I can use when this happens, and then I'll get out of the pain. And of course, I went through the same thing. You get the 1 day healings, you know?
Yeah. And one after another, really. It's like, because I'm a physical person. I wasn't a yoga teacher then, but I am now. But I did yoga a lot, and a lot of mind body practices, you know, embodiment work, men's work, all the things. And I would hit on something that would seem to work for either a short period or a longer period. But then, because I wasn't really getting to the root of the issue, which were those core assumptions I mentioned about not being good enough, needing to fix things, needing to control things, not feeling things that I had, buried from the past. Like I didn't get to those, so eventually the issue would just crop up again in another form or the same form. And I would be like, oh no, it's back. And I'd freak out. Right.
Wow. Yeah, people are hooked right now, trust me. They wanna hear
Yeah.
what happens next because
Yeah.
I have a lot of people who come to me that have not only tried the Western medicine route, didn't really get a lot of results there, they did physical therapy, and they're like, "And I've even meditated for
Right.
several months or something, or I've even done some retreats," or they've done a lot of these somatic practices, and that's really good. They're obviously trending in the right direction. But you can even do those things in a bit of a rote way, or I would call it
Yeah.
an intellectual way. It's like the observing mind is doing the meditation or doing the practice versus embodying and feeling the thing that that practice is walking you towards because
Yeah.
it's so uncomfortable to feel it, or you
Yeah.
just haven't really known that it's possible yet. But that's why I'm wondering, how did you break through that? How did you really get closer to that core of the root causes and start to see them for what they are?
It's not just one thing. It's a combination of factors that start to build on themselves to create this momentum of healing and letting go. But I think the biggest shift was a shift actually that was forced on me in my marriage that was like my wife basically deciding she didn't know whether she wanted to together, be with me. And I, you know, dug my fingernails in and was like freaked out about it. But then I actually had to surrender that. It was just too much I mean, once I realized I can't control another person. And once I surrendered to that, then I started to realize just in general that the most important thing for me was to not try to control things I can't control and to differentiate between like what is my business. There's a teacher named Byron Katie talks about, is that your business? Is that somebody else's business? Or is that God's business? When she says God, she means like, the weather, right? Just nobody's in control of the weather. But what do I control and what do I not control? And and there's a many different ways to do it. How do I surrender to the things I can't control? Because trying to control my wife or even trying to control my erection, like I can't control that. If we could control it, if anyone could actually control it, well, everyone would be going around and there would be no ED because there would be a way to control it, but we don't, or I don't anyway. So once I realized, oh, I don't control that, all I can do is listen and kind of like have this conversation. What does my body actually want in this moment? So to learn that difference between what I can control and what I can't control in the present moment, that was the biggest thing. And then the next step, of course, is like, okay, well, there are certain things I can control. As you were mentioning, like I can sit down to meditate and I can do the meditation. Whether it has the effect, the outcome that I want, that I have to let go of. But I can sit and be fully in the intention of the meditation. If I'm sitting in meditation, I'm like, I'm doing this to fix my AD. If I just meditate enough, I'll fix my AD. Well, then I'm not actually meditating. I'm trying to fix myself. And that's the activity I'm doing. Like any activity, any healing activity that could be healing is not going to be that way if I have the attitude of I need to control this thing I can't control, which is the pain, my body, my sexual performance, all those things.
That's amazing. Yeah. Definitely easier said than done. The letting go of control. How do you think that that's happened? Was it more of just the ego
Mm,
kind of breaking apart due to the separation, or it was
mm.
such a like a tragedy almost that the ego saw its limitations?
Yeah, that's very insightful. I think that was a big part of it. And, I wish that it were, a lot of people said it's like sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can really let go of what you need to let go of. Because the problem is, for me, again, my experience, but I think other people that I've talked to have this, is our mechanisms, our little habits that we develop to protect ourselves that cause chronic pain and, all sorts of other manifestations of that in our life. Those things actually function pretty well to protect us from certain things, whether it's feeling shame, whether it's feeling, so it's like we can get by on that, right? In some way, those habits have served us either to create a sense of safety like stuffing down emotions, it's like, you know, I'm in less discomfort, yeah, in the present moment, but in the long term, it's gonna come back. So these little habits that have some utility for us, letting go of those only becomes worthwhile when the discomfort is so great. My body's saying, I'm so out of alignment with myself that the discomfort is so great. And the factors in my life, the evidence in my life of my misalignment, my not listening to my body, my making poor choices is so great that and the discomfort's so great that I can only let go and surrender to it.
Mm.
However, I would say I also went to a retreat around sort of personal growth, particularly around sexuality, that was groundbreaking for me. I think that combination of the like ego death of my wife wanting to separate and then going into this retreat in which I found self-love, that was the combo that enabled me to let go of the control.
Mm.
And
Amazing.
self-love is it's a whole subject unto itself. And it's easy to talk about it, but like, what does it actually mean? Again, if I'm just loving myself so that I can perform for someone else, that's not really self-love. So like, what is real self-love? What does it really mean to take care of myself moment to moment? Like, talk to my body. What do I need? What do I need that's gonna be right for me?
So it's a listening to the body is what you're saying. And would you also say it's in total acceptance of what is right now?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many contradictions and I've in writing a review for your book, which I enjoyed so much, there are a lot of contradictions in these are really spiritual questions in a sense. And whether they're religious or not, it's really like they're questions about what is our existence and purpose as human beings. And one of those contradictions is I have to accept what's happening to me in the moment, even if I really don't like it, in order to shift it in the next moment.
Yeah. It's a mind F because you have to completely be with what is right now,
Yeah.
almost for a seeming eternity, right? Within the timeless though,
Yeah.
for the next moment when it does present to change. And it's this really deep surrender, like you said. It's a deep surrender and a letting go of control, perhaps a fictitious control, a control you thought that you had. But it's a letting go and it's that inner resistance. And then you can also feel it in the body versus it just being a thought of like, how do I let go of this resistance? Like, what does that
Yeah.
even mean? Is it just not thinking about stuff as much? If you just feel in the body, you'll notice some sort of contraction in some place of your body typically when there's a resistance. So you can notice it and it starts to soften because you notice it. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I think everyone needs to develop their own version of a practice, like a life practice of, again, figuring out what I control, what I don't control, and surrendering to that I don't control. And then for the things I do control, like what's my process for listening to my body, for learning, for figuring out what I need. Yeah. And the getting out of the head and into the body, there's a million tools out there and they can all work, but like different ones work for different people. So it's almost like oh, seeing myself as like an explorer or adventurer. I think you might talk about it as loving the process in both the Overcome program and Vigor. It's like love the process. Like this is my journey. This is my adventure in life. Is to do this work and not to be done with it and never have to think about it again. So every step of the way, like this is the adventure I'm on to love it and embrace it, including, because like if life was just having everything we wanted all the time, like that would get old actually. We wouldn't even like it that much because there was
Yeah.
nothing to compare it to there. I didn't go through any challenge or I didn't even know that there's a possibility of things not going perfectly all the time.
Yeah, and it may seem like we're talking about pelvic health and sexual health, but
Mm.
the same conversation is being had on YouTube channels about chronic
Yeah.
fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia or cancer, et cetera, because it's just the hero's journey that for
Mhm.
some reason your particular mind body is going through. And it's a deepening of liberation, of realization, of discovery of who you are and actually what is right here, right now.
Yeah. That reminds me of one of the things that reminds me of one tool that I used to get into that moment, to get into that mindset, which is to treat every moment, whatever is happening, whether I don't like it or whether I love it, as an opportunity for me in life, something to learn, some way to grow. And so, especially for the challenging things, it's easy to embrace. Well, that might not be true. I was one of those people who, when good things happen, I wouldn't even let them in because I was so attached to myself, my idea of myself as inadequate, and to my own suffering. So, whether it's something good in my life or something bad in my life, like, well, what is this here for? I don't necessarily believe that in destiny and that kind of thing as a objective truth. But I do believe that treating life as if it were meant to be this way is actually the most functional way to live. So whatever's happening, I can't change it. So I might as well treat it like it's here for a reason. And then in that way, I'm like sort of leaning into it. So it's almost one step past acceptance, because acceptance has a little bit of a passivity to it. And sometimes I would find I'm accepting, but I was really just tolerating. And there was a subtle aversion, a subtle tension, a subtle closure to that. It's actually, I had to find a way to be like, how can I say yes to this? Like, okay, chronic pain, like pelvic pain. Yes, it's here. It's here to provide me with wisdom. And
Yeah,
what is the wisdom?
I like that. So you did a couple of things in terms of the retreat and of course the self-love. You've already conveyed a lot of the deep surrender aspects. I'm wondering, in the Overcome and Vigor programs, were there any specific tools or things you're like, that really helped, or that gave me a way to embody the teachings? That's really why the programs are there. They're more of, okay, I'm understanding what you're saying, Michael, in your book or whatever, but how do I actually do that? So did you see
Yeah.
anything there that helped you to embody it?
It's so hard to know specifically, like if I do a program like that, it's hard to know which ones were the keys, right? Like it's like a recipe, like it's the unique mixture of those things. But I did find that for me, the sexual practices and the combination of, like, because I was following someone else's instruction, and I also, you know, it was like I could kind of surrender to that guidance, right? And I had tried a million times, probably like anybody with ED, like all the Kegels and the stretches and the moving sexual energy and all that stuff, and had kind of mild to moderate success. But there was something about the combination of the the psycho emotional piece that like was like jet fuel for finally getting it, finally feeling, oh, this is what it feels like for these kind of tantric practices or hageling or all that kind of moving energy combined with the physical engagement and strengthening the pelvic floor. For that to actually work, having enough of that, like, think of it like grasping sand. You know, when you grasp a handful of sand, it slips through your fingers. But like doing these practices, one, with a sense of, okay, I'm not doing this because I'm not enough. I'm doing this with a curiosity. I'm doing this like really connected to pleasure and not to be good enough. And then, like, in addition to that, I've done a million tantric practices, but it never occurred to me to do it with actual affection and tenderness for myself. It was always like, God damn it, I wish this meat sack would just do what I wanted it to.
Mhm. That's
Instead of
amazing.
like, oh, how would I want a lover to be with me? How would I want my lover to feel when they're with me, and to treat them like with that kind of tenderness? So bringing in that softness, I guess, is a way of putting it. The "be soft to get hard" mantra that you mentioned. Yeah. So bringing in that softness into all the practices. But yeah, specifically, those were like a new, uh, I don't know if it's the unique combination. And again, as I've mentioned, I've studied a million versions of Tantra and all the exercises, and there were actually really like actual new things I'd never seen before in those sexual practices that felt like just exciting to learn something new.
Right. Yeah, you were surrendering to the process. You're like, "Just take me where we're gonna go, and I'm
Yeah.
open for it. We'll see what
Yeah.
happens."
The
As
breath work was also, I neglected to mention it. It's easy to blow past that because it's the beginning of the program, but I think I noticed a shift immediately after that.
you're talking about the long breathwork journey?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Which I avoided doing because I was like, oh, it's going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to feel things I don't like, which of course is exactly what I needed.
until you feel amazing and you feel things that are
Yeah,
beautiful that you've never felt. So,
yeah. Everything I want to feel is on the other side of something I don't. That's one of my favorite sayings.
yeah, that's really good. Yeah, and I think what you're pointing out here is it's the combination because people are like, I've done the tantric practices or I've done this, but have you been surrendering and letting go of control as you're doing some practices, as you're accepting and loving yourself? Or everyone has a different thing, but
Mm.
it's that combination where, I mean, this is just a made up number, but I'll say it's 80% the root cause and it's 20% the practices.
Yeah,
What I mean by that is the practices are useful, but they're still physiologic. They're still happening at the musculoskeletal nervous system level. The root causes are literally what have molded you to be reactive a certain way, to contract, to cut off the energy flow, to create the neural circuitry, even to have certain things happen in the body. So, that's why I'm so happy that you were able to get closer to those things and really make shifts there. And I'm wondering just if you could share how you're doing now. Like, how is it feeling in your body? How have your sexual experiences been? Everyone wants to know who's watching.
yeah, yeah. I would say better than ever. Literally better than ever. I mean, my erections are better now than when I was 16 years old. Um,
Amazing.
I mean, with some differences, but like in terms of my connection to them, right? Like my connection to the body, what I can actually feel and like my enjoyment of my body and my sexual experiences is better than it's ever been. And I think I have, one thing that I think keeps me in that zone is to continually keep letting go of it, right? So like feel good, right? And celebrate the victories and celebrate the improvement and the pleasure and all that, and the lack of pain or the reduction in pain. But to continually let go of the fact that like, or accept the fact that I don't have control over that. It's a two steps forward, one step back path, at least in my experience. And whenever there's that back step, it's like, oh no, this is an opportunity again to make sure that I'm sticking with what got me here, that I'm being honest with myself, that I'm not just using success to like to leave the past and go back into the old ways of being, whether it's the people pleasing or the performing.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, and I mean, what I've learned about relationships is probably as important than anything. It's like my relationship myself and my relationship to other people. I haven't mentioned this yet, but boundaries, especially boundaries with myself, like honoring if my body's telling me because like my cock won't get hard or because I'm in pain, it's saying no, right? And I need to honor that and not try to override. So every time like I have a moment that feels like something I'm not wanting, then I say yes to that and say, like, I'm what's the saying? It's like every time if someone says no to me, they're saying yes to themselves. So that's really my experience. It's like if my body's saying no to me, it's actually a gift
Yeah,
because then I have an opportunity to say yes, to reinforce through self love, through action by listening to my body. And that's like self love is a way of being. It's not like a mindset so much as like it's what I do. Listen to my body. That's an act of love. Give myself something that I need. That's an act of love. It's what I do.
that's amazing. So I'll just ask you a question. Imagine today, or it could be someone
Mm,
who's watching this. They don't get hard. They're trying to have sex
yeah.
with their wife
Mm,
and
yeah.
they get the no. They get the no, right?
Yeah.
What would you recommend that they do in that moment when they're
Yeah.
getting
It's funny I hadn't mentioned this yet because this was as big as a path to healing as anything. And it's very simple, as hard as it is. But I learned this from another, another, I think he's a somatic sexual therapist, but he said, trust your cock. And every time, which means if I start to go numb or if I start to, my erection starts to fade, what I do is I pause, I take a big breath and I say, I just let it. I'm like, great. This is what you want. I say yes to that. And just after one breath, I just like almost encourage it, just let it drop, say yes. And then I engage sensation again and start to bring sensation back, maybe after one breath or two. And most of the time, the sensation returns. But I have to like let go and say yes to my body's message of whatever the reason is. It's not feeling safe. Or all of a sudden I moved into performance mode and my body goes, nope, we're not doing that. And that can be, it's great to practice on my own if I'm just like doing self pleasure. Like anytime I notice, oh, there's some numbness happening or there's a little bit of softening, say yes, stop and let it drop. And then learn that I can actually recover that once I reconnect with myself and fall back, come back into healing. So that's a big, big practice. Like every single time, like I don't control it, say yes, and make sure my partner's clear on that. Like I don't make promises for my body that I can't meet. My body's, my cock decides. And if we're going to do this, then you need to be okay with that. And if someone's not okay with that, then it's really important that I know that.
Yeah. That's amazing. I appreciate you sharing that kind of in the moment process. And when it comes to, I know a lot of people with ED, they kind of test themselves. They're like, oh, let me see if it's working today, or I'm going on a date tomorrow.
I used to do that.
Exactly, like the testing. Even with people without ED, I mean, people with pelvic pain, et cetera, I used to do these things too. I would masturbate, be like, does it feel weird today? Does it feel weird? Like, am I getting better? Does it hurt when I ejaculate? All that stuff. And so there's the testing, and then there's a lot of concern and worry, like, oh, we haven't had sex in a week or 2 weeks, or like my wife's going to be expecting all that. How do you go about that now? How do you go about
Yeah.
letting go of that timeline and the schedule and the
Mm,
checking and everything?
yeah. Well, first, the testing is a major pitfall or mistake in how things actually work because it's especially with the pelvis, like it's a moment to moment yes or no. And that moment, that yes or no can shift any moment. So just because, like, and the bottom line is if we've gone to the doctor, we've gone to the urologist, we had our, there's nothing actually physically wrong with us, especially if we can get hard on our own, then we know that there's not something broken, there's not something wrong. It's just a moment to moment yes or no that's in my body, depending on a lot of different factors. And so one, testing beforehand isn't going to tell me anything about whether it's a yes in that moment with that person an hour from now. But also, I've also had that reverse experience where I'm a no, and all of a sudden I'm in the midst of a like, well, I'm just going to keep moving into what I am a yes to, even if I'm not hard, and being connection. And then all of a sudden, for no reason that I can see, all of a sudden my body's a yes, and I'm off and running. And so, just trusting the moment to moment response of my body, and that look like I can't. Nothing is available to me that's not available. Right? I don't have an entitlement to any particular experience in my life, and that goes especially for a erotic connection with another person. So I think it's really important for me to learn how beautiful and delicious, like just being in sensation, just kissing, all those things. If I can't enjoy each one of those aspects of a sexual experience with another person, like then I'm hung up on it's gonna look like this, then I'm screwed. I really have to just say, whatever I'm supposed to get from this experience, I will get.
Yeah.
And then just let us see what happens. That's what's so beautiful about like I'm planning it out and I want it to go look like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and have it to go exactly the way I wanted it. I suppose there's a certain type of satisfaction in it, but there's way more magic in experiencing, ooh, what's gonna happen? I can't wait to find out. And what can I learn from it? And what, yeah, the newness.
It's way better. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the surrendering again. There's less of a known factor about when sex will even happen or how it will happen, or but
Yeah.
when it's there, when the energy is just happening with this other person, it's there and just be with it. Just like there could be a moment where you're in pain or there's a sensation you don't like, be with it. It's the same answer, of course, but that's part of the learning that we're doing
Yeah.
is being able to accept life in the way that it is.
I
One of
also think setting a container is really important. Sorry to interrupt.
no, go
Setting a
ahead.
container with my partner and saying, this is what I'm desiring. hearing what they desire, like these sharing, like, I have some fears around this. What are your fears? And then being clear that we're both a yes to whatever it is that we both want. And if they have an expectation that, yeah, I'm going to be deeply disappointed if you don't get hard, look, like that's not a scenario I'm going to be comfortable in. So just not like, I just can't bother trying to connect with someone who's not on the same page as I am. And that might mean passing up on some potential experiences, but it also means like then I'm really the experiences I do have are with people that like really are on board with what I want and what they want.
It's a very safe space for you to be who you are. That's great. Amazing. I wanted to also dip into some of the mechanical or manual things that have helped you. Just,
Mm,
it's a part of the conversation, of course. You've mentioned things like posture in the past to me. You mentioned some other kind of sexual practices you've specifically
yeah.
done. Anything at all like that has helped you
Yeah.
can also be good.
Working with a somatic sexual therapist, I know in some states that's legal, in other states not. There's all sorts of different types of arrangements. It depends on where you are, but like working with someone where there's like an agreement to where there can be connection, there can be body work, there can be even general touch in some states. But like that's a huge to create positive experiences where I can listen to my body and not like perform and just be in that practice of like vulnerability, all those things. So working with another a practitioner who is familiar with these things and doesn't blink when you're talking about ED and premature ejaculation, all these things are like, yeah, that's why I work with people, you know? So that's a big thing. And as far as physical, so touch, actual like safety producing touch, even in an erotic way. The postural piece was a huge one for me to find a way to have good posture, to figure out what my postural like miscues were and to start to solve those, but not to do it in a fixing way, in a rigid way. So to have like an explorative, curious approach to it. One of the biggest things for me find was to engage with my feet and how I was carrying myself, like how I was bearing the weight in my feet. And so instead of trying to work directly on the pelvis, like, oh, I have an anterior pelvic tilt, I need to jam it into a neutral alignment, like actually working on parts of the body that are distal from the pelvis, but have an impact on the pelvis. Because one of the things that I have found is like the pelvis doesn't like to be told what to do. It wants to be listened to. It wants to be offered practices. It wants to be offered deep, smooth, even breath. It wants to be offered the opportunity to be in alignment through postural changes, but not to be forced to do that. So yeah, a big thing was like just finding the weight at the balls of my foot, the base of my big toes, find the center of my heel, notice whether I'm leaning forward and or too far back and find that neutral point. And that when I do that, like I just feel that there's a relaxation and a like that just the pelvis finds a more natural balance position. So that those are and I mean, I'm a yoga teacher, so I'm always exploring new things. Being just iterative about it, not jumping ahead and trying to like squat 300 pounds, like just giving the body a time to get used to a practice or an exercise before I start to up the ante.
Mhm.
Yeah, those are some of the things. Diet, of course, is important. Being hydrated is important. Just like keep that healthy baseline so that when I face challenges, whether they're emotional, physical, like I just have that little bit of extra gas in the tank to deal with them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I know you touched on this a little bit already, but I want to circle back around because I think it's quite important. You mentioned some of the root causes, the performance.
Mm,
I think you said people pleasing potentially as
mm,
well,
yeah.
and boundaries. Well, you've already touched on it some, but how would you say you've integrated the changes in those areas versus it just being, I had a deep moment of surrender and it's all gone now and it all
Yeah.
flushed down the toilet with my ego. There's still a
Mm,
living life through the mind body that has been molded a certain way in its nervous
yeah.
system. How's that been going?
I think it does go back to that question of the individual practice that I need to develop moment to moment when I noticed. It's like first is to start with listening and to my body. So this might sound like kind of an oblique way of answering your question, but the answer is if I listen to my body, it will give me the information to know when I'm departing from the path that's really working for me. So whether it's pain, whether it's dysfunction, whether it's just a sense of disease in different like nerve centers, we have responses to situations that have all sorts of different textures and but like, does this feel good? Or does this just make it really simple? Do I feel really good right now or is something off? And if something's off, then that's an opportunity to do an inquiry. Like, what do I need here? And so let's say with boundaries, which you mentioned, I'll know if a boundary is being crossed either by myself or somebody else because I will feel in my body, assuming I'm connected to the sensation in my body, something will feel off. If I feel really good, then it's very unlikely that there's a boundary being crossed, at least like my boundary, and that's my own experience. Some people are so numb uh, to their own internal messaging in their body that they don't perceive that. And if that's the case, I would say it's really important to like get in touch with that because if I don't know my own boundaries and I can't perceive what's happening in my body when it's communicating to me, then I'm just going to keep trampling them. So I'm going to allow other people to trample them. So that is like, I guess the motivator, the thing that keeps me coming back is realizing that this is like, there's no end to the potential for growth if I keep doing it, right? Not resting on my laurels and be like, yeah, this is good enough. Because at least in my experience, I'm either falling back or I'm moving forward. It's nice to think like, oh, I've reached this nice plateau and I want to just stay here. But like my experience is life doesn't work that way. Like life is continually offering us challenges, new opportunities for growth. And that's just the way it works. Like life doesn't stay in, you've talked about in meditation, noticing that like change is constant, but that who I am, the viewer, the consciousness, this like beingness that I am experiencing change, that is the consistent, the constant. So it's coming back to me, right? It's like just landing back at home here in my body.
Yeah. So you're letting your body be the messenger and it's
Yeah.
telling you what's happening. And it sounds like the awareness that you've created around the body, feeling it, getting past the numbness, getting past the I don't feel my emotions, or it's not safe to feel sensations, or let me divert, let me distract, let me
Yeah.
eat something, let me masturbate, let me all those things.
Yeah.
Pulling these things away typically because we're forced to, right? But whenever we get to it, we're like, okay, now my body is telling me that I feel uncomfortable when my partner asks me to do this thing. And then we can listen to that, have a conversation. And then we may even go a step further and notice that that discomfort is just arising because of how we were molded in our childhood, as an
Mhm.
example. And there's
Yeah.
a letting go of something even deeper. So there are deep roots. These root causes can have deep roots. And it's not that you have to get down to the very end and be self realized in order to feel good in your body. However, the body is just, I see it as a compass to help us redirect, realign. The body's always trying to maintain
Yeah.
equilibrium. It's always doing that.
Yeah.
It's very good at that. And our mind is this powerful tool of observation, of creation, of commentation. And the mind, it's a fun experience of being alive. But if you overly identify with it and you think it is your primary directive, then
Mhm.
you're going to go down really, you're going to get to a dead end. You're going to be sidetracked often.
Yeah. And it's hard to resist that because we live in a world that's very mind thought oriented. One of my favorite meditative practices, and you offered versions of it in the book, is to sit down because a lot of people think about meditation as okay, I shouldn't think. Thinking's bad, right? And you and I were just kind of subtly criticizing thinking, maybe. But it's not that thinking's bad. And in fact, thoughts, what I found is the first thought that comes to mind from a place of embodied quiet and stillness always has something to offer me. Like my body's trying to tell me something, even if it's like, oh, don't forget to send your taxes or whatever it is. Don't forget to put those letters in the mailbox. The initial thought is useful. And then I can say, oh, well, thank you for reminding me. So long as I don't start engaging in like and connecting and attaching to or being aversive to the thought, I can just be like, that thought was useful. And then I just let it pass. I go back to stillness. What I like to do is say, what do I need to know? When I sit down, I just rest in quiet and I wait for a thought. And the thought comes up, and the initial thought, useful. So long as I don't jump on that horse and go for a ride. So yeah, it's finding a balance between realizing the utility and the value of thoughts as like our body communicating to us, and not like clinging to them and creating and getting lost, losing who I am, losing myself in thought.
Right, exactly. That's amazing. The thought is like the letter that your body is trying to send to you more clearly, or your
Mm,
subconscious. But that's a very
yeah,
big conversation. What even is that?
yeah,
Where does it even come from? But yeah, exactly. They're just different things to experience and observe and take in versus giving all of it your energy, which is
yeah.
where you can really get taken astray. I wanted to wrap up today, and we could talk even more at some other point perhaps, but this was really helpful for everyone. I know it was. Thank you, Jacob, for sharing vulnerably and just getting into the details. Do you have one final thing you'd like to share, final takeaway or final insight?
I think the biggest thing is trust your body, and you don't have to have all the answers, but the being in the process with that quality of like care for oneself is the most important part. Whatever my experience of my pain or my sexual function is, out of my control, what I can control is how I relate to it. That's a great purpose to have in life, to just be with the intention of loving myself, taking care of myself, and seeing that when I do that, life provides. I'll get what I need.
That's beautiful. Thank you
Yeah.
for that and for the whole conversation. It was amazing.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Michael. Happy to talk to anyone also individually if people like want to share, or this does feel really part of my life's work to engage in this way. And I want to be of
Absolutely.
any support that I can to others.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll include some of your info in the description if someone wants to reach out.
Great. Thanks a lot, Michael.